Hello, everyone. We have a lot to cover today. I'll go kind of fast, so pay attention, take notes. There will be a test. Before we go on to anything else, I want to remind everybody what is happening in Ukraine on a daily basis. It's things like this one. Russians were whining that Ukrainians are scaring children in the Kursk region and not letting them celebrate New Year. I'd like to remind everybody that so far Russians had stolen 3 years worth of Christmases, New Year's, and years of those children's childhood that are living in Ukraine. Because Ukrainian children are having to watch the air raid apps and having to take classes in the subways wherever there are subways, which it's not everywhere. A lot of cities don't have subways. So I want to remind everybody, as there are speculations about sanctions, negotiations, etc., this is happening. In its best tradition, Russia launched another attack on New Year's Day. 2 people were killed in Kyiv. At least 6 more were wounded. Buildings were damaged in 2 districts. So, just another day in Ukraine. That's what's happening. This is just one of the photos of the aftermath. Yeah, that looks like a military base, doesn't it? Or NATO headquarters. This is the part that gets me. For those of you who still believe this is a war by proxy, by Soros, NATO, US, Obama, Biden, whatever, explain to me, why are Russians targeting Ukrainian civilians? And here's the thing. Everything they hit can be verified through satellite imagery. And so far, they have vastly outdone themselves when it comes to hitting civilian targets versus military targets. Explain that to me. So, if it's NATO, why aren't they hitting targets in NATO? On NATO territory? Ukraine is not even a NATO member. Why aren't they hitting targets in the US? Alaska is right over there. There are military bases in Alaska. What's the problem? Because it's bullshit. That's why. So now let's go back to the diplomacy of it all, or lack thereof. So there is an article today in New York Times talking about what's going to happen to the sanctions. Trump is already saying that he's not interested in extending the sanctions. I said in the past that sanctions don't work if it's just sanctions. So they are having some effect on Russian people, but not enough to stop the war. Sanctions have to be supported by something else, like a show of force, if they are to work. It can't be just one approach and hope everything works out. You can never resolve such conflicts with just using one thing and hope that it works. So, looking at the effect of the sanctions, we have interest rates at the 23%, inflation running above 9%, ruble is falling, okay, and their economic growth had slowed down. On a personal level, people in Russia are complaining about the high price of groceries and so on and so forth. So, but look at what Putin said. He said the sanctions are having an effect, but they're not of key importance. That's his way to say that he doesn't care if his own people starve. He does not care. He will keep fighting to the bitter end, which means that in addition to the sanctions, there have to be some other measures to battle him. So this is interesting, and this is in a lot of the news sources today. The former region of Moldova, which broke away, the Transnistria, woke up without heating and hot water today because Ukraine refused to renew the gas transit agreement with Russia because of the war. It's like, why should Ukraine help boost Russian economy while Russia is attacking Ukraine? So, all logical there. And here's something interesting. So that particular region of Moldova, formerly Moldova, is very pro-Russian. They had split away back in the 90s when the Soviet Union fell apart. And since then, any time Russia had cut gas to Ukraine, they spent their time gleefully trolling Ukraine online and mocking Ukraine for refusing to follow the Russian course of action when it comes to global development. They're not laughing now. Moldova itself says that they're taking measures to cut the energy consumption and to beef up their domestic production and work out some other agreements with its neighbors like Romania to get the rest of the gas from there. But I don't know if this particular region, if Transnistria, will be included in that since they broke away. This should concern everybody, that Putin had ordered Russia's biggest bank to collaborate with China on expanding the artificial intelligence research and platforms. So, let's unpack this. I know there are people out there who are very anti-AI, and I can understand that. But remember, behind every AI use is a human being. What you should be angry at is not the AI, which is basically just a piece of technology like any other piece of technology, but people who are misusing it and using it for their own purposes, which is what we're talking about. What Putin wants is more misinformation, more trolling, more bots, more election interference, and that's why he wants this. The way to stop this is not to prohibit AI, is to do something about people who are misusing it. And then there's this big article talking about, will there be an end to the war in 2025? People inside Ukraine, including my parents, are very skeptical about this. So I suggest you look up the title of this article and pop over and read the whole thing. It is a big one. And it is on the BBC website. So, this is a good point. The talk of negotiations is an illusion. In case everybody hadn't figured it out already, Trump's talk about ending the war in 24 hours before he even stepped into the office was all bullshit. It was just an election ploy. Anyone paying attention could have figured it out, but, here we are. We know this. Nevertheless, Zelensky is trying to sidle up to Trump, trying to befriend him, because he understands, if nothing else, that he needs strong allies, and Europe's position on the subject, amazingly, remains divided, despite having front and center seats to what is unfolding in Ukraine. Once again, a set of very, very good maps showing the progression of the war. I strongly recommend this. As you recall, the victory plan that Zelensky had unveiled in October was disappointing because it almost entirely relied on somebody else to give Ukraine something that it needs to defend itself. In exchange, Zelensky offered the now very well-trained and experienced Ukrainian troops to provide safety in Europe, but nobody took him up on it. I agree that there need to be signed agreements. I agree that this all has to be set very, very firmly. Who owes what to whom? We'll have to see. Europe really needs to pay better attention.